Invincible returned once again to our app screens this week with a brand new episode wonderfully entitled You Look Kinda Dead. I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, as well as shouting out any comic book Easter eggs I can find. So with that out of the way, let's get right to it, shall we? So that instead of dealing with the bloody fallout from last week's episode right away, instead we're treated to a little prologue setting up some of the new threats and characters Invincible will be dealing with this week. We meet a drunken, loudmouth frat boy voiced by Rick Sanchez himself, Justin Roiland. And I mean, do I even have to tell you that he did all his own VO belches? Because of course he did. Frat boy McGee over here ends up getting grabbed by this week's villain du jour, D.A. Sinclair, a mad scientist hell-bent on evolving the human condition via robotics. Sinclair also just so happens to be voiced by Ezra Miller. You know, it's funny, Miller has mostly been cast in live action as the heroic lead, but I think their true talent lays as creepy, slimy, arrogant villains like this one. Also, because animation takes so very long to finish, there's no telling if this was before or after Miller choked that woman on camera and hoped that we would all just kind of forget about it. Now back over with Mark, the doctors rush to save his life and the lives of Black Samson and Monster Girl after they were nearly beaten to death in the fight with Battle Beast. Robot, as he has been doing a lot lately, takes a particular interest in the well-being of Monster Girl, assisting the doctors with his extensive knowledge of her biology and the curse that gives her her amazing powers. And no, this wildly creepy obsessive behavior does not raise a single red flag with anyone. In fact, as Black Samson will note later on, he didn't think Robot actually felt anything for anyone on any level, having no human emotions. Which, come to think of it, may actually end up being the perfect cover for a stalker. Again, I know these two have a much more deeper, complicated relationship in the comics, and it's too early to tell where the show's gonna go with it. But as far as it stands right now, between being very possessive of Monster Girl and working with the Mauler twins, it does not look good for Robot right now. Mark is ultimately able to pull through his injuries, but now comes what might actually be harder than cheating death, trying to make it up to his girlfriend Amber for the 100th time. Adam Eve was nice enough to spin a tale about Mark getting hit by a bus on his way to the shelter, and while they do ultimately reconcile, it's clear that Mark is skating on some very, very thin ice. Speaking of Adam, Eve, and she also gets a hard-working B-plot this week. In the previous episode, we had met her unsupportive parents who always feared that her powers would end up getting her killed, and that feeling has only been supercharged lately now that their daughter, after seeing how the other half lived at the shelter, now wants to use her power for the betterment of all mankind and not just for stopping bank robberies and alien invasions. It's hard work, but you definitely get the feeling by the end of this story that Adam Eve is more fulfilled with herself than she ever was as part of any super team. Now, when Mark gets the chance to accompany best friend William on a university trip, he decides to take the opportunity to show Amber just how invested he is in the future and how he wants her to be a part of it with him. Granted, what Mark didn't consider is that it's not just the pre-med program William is interested in, it's also the guy they're going to be crashing with for the weekend, Rick Sheridan, aka his boyfriend from the comics. Mark and Amber actually do take some much-needed time away from Mark's double life as Invincible, and they do end up growing a lot closer this episode. I also appreciate Amber not letting Mark slide in the way so many other superhero love interests do when it comes to the topic of ambition. Mark might want to go to university with Amber, but that doesn't mean he's going to get to, so long as his grades stay where they are right now, which he's not going to be able to fix so long as he's also doing the Invincible thing. The happy couple's day out is ruined, though, when one of Sinclair's experiments manages to escape and starts tearing up the campus. Now, in the comics, these things were called reanimen, yet they aren't called that in the show. I wonder if they thought it was too silly or something. In order to save his friends, Mark is forced to run away and come back as Invincible. These robots are tough opponents, and in truth, Mark doesn't actually win this fight so much as the creature ends up getting so horrified with its own face it takes its own life, exactly like it did in issue 6 of the comics, although admittedly, the episode is a bit more graphic than the book was. Issue 6 also just so happens to be the story that this episode is mostly based on, except for the stuff with Sinclair, he wouldn't actually show up until around issue 20. It's during this battle William actually manages to figure out that Invincible is Mark. I like how he does it too. It plays into a long-running joke from the comic that has yet to actually appear in the show, and that is that regular people tend to have a hard time looking up. This is meant both figuratively, as in they are so stuck in their own rat race lives they rarely take the time to notice the super world around them, but also very literally, and that is they don't look up and see the super people flying in the sky around them. Now, in the comics, William was actually kind of indifferent to learning this secret, but here in the show he's a bit more excited by the prospect. Furthermore, comic William actually didn't come out of the closet right away because he briefly dated Adam Eve, who was actually the first hero to take him flying. The show plays this all a little bit differently, but I like it for what it is. They even managed to bring back a long-running joke from the comic too about William always wanting to try on Invincible's costume, and I mean, really, who can blame him? It's a great suit. Now, as you might have guessed, running away from the fight proves to be the last straw from Amber, which in a meta-storytelling standpoint is actually really damn interesting. I mean, consider how many times we've seen Clark Kent or Peter Parker run away only to get chewed out by their love interest, but to be taken back almost as quickly. Mark will be in the doghouse for the rest of the episode, and every attempt he makes to try and fix the situation only ends up making things worse, leading to a big old teen drama movie misunderstanding at a frat party later on. It's also because Mark is so absorbed in his own drama he blows off William asking for help after Rick gets kidnapped by D.A. Sinclair to be part of his experiments. I must say that the show does some really great stuff here with William. He's so much more than just a Jimmy Olsen best friend sidekick. In fact, he does all the legwork and detective work, and even gets a couple good shots in at the bad guy before it's all over. In fact, it's made very, very clear Invincible probably wouldn't have been able to beat the Reanimen were it not for William managing to break on through to Rick, who in turn shows Mark how to power down the other robots only after they gave him a massive gang beatdown. The day is saved, but once again in what is becoming a major recurring theme for Invincible, it's not a happy ending. Mark and Amber didn't reconcile, and William is unsure about the fate of Rick as he gets collected by the Global Defense Agency. Oh, but wait, we're not done yet, because at the other end of the episode we have Debbie finally getting undeniable proof from Art the costume maker about the role her husband Omni-Man played in the murder of the Guardians of the Globe. Nolan is hot on her trail though, and the whole thing becomes very tense and very uncomfortable very quickly, especially as Omni-Man tries to put the fear of God into Art, a man who was already so terrified he was never going to tell anyone to begin with. As the episode comes to a close, a drunken Debbie confronts Nolan about everything he did, and while he doesn't end up hurting her, he does punch the drywall just in case you needed any more insight into the kind of guy Nolan really is underneath it all. And so that was You Look Kinda Dead, and much like last week's episode, this one benefited a ton from really getting laser focused on one or two stories now that the world, the characters, and their relationships have all been so thoroughly set up and fleshed out. There was a real recurring theme of couples this week, not just Mark and Amber or William and Rick, but also Robot and Monster Girl, and as always, Nolan and Debbie. Some grow together, some grow apart, and some are still holding secrets that threaten to hurt not only them, but all the people around them too. I feel that Invincible the show has benefited a ton from having several ticking clocks all at once, where we as the audience are just so on the edge of our seat, feeling so much dread and wondering where the next shoe is gonna drop. It all makes for some really engrossing TV. Overall, I thought this one was another winner. Things are really heating up as we head into next week in the penultimate episode of Season 1, and I cannot wait to see what happens when we get there.